this country, and I think it's an absolute mess, and there's legitimate reason to believe, whether it's via exploratory committees or anything else, that I indeed would have a legitimate shot to win the presidency of the United States, I am not going to rule it out, and I'm not playing. I just think that it's a mess right now. I'm not scared. There's a lot that I have to learn. I am no aficionado, make no mistake about it. But damn it, let me hunker down for 2 or 3 months. I'll know the issues. And once that happens, then imagining me on a debate stage with these.
Right? Listen, I know it sounds crazy, but if you think about it, President Trump set the precedent that, hey, you don't need to be somebody that is in politics. You don't need to be, somebody that's an expert.
My thoughts here on Stephen A. Smith and him finally coming out of the closet and saying what's been obvious and true for a solid 3 years. The guy wants to run for president. There are clearly powerful people backing him in his run for president. They wrote a book.
So we got Stephen A. Smith saying that if he just hunkers down for a few months, he would know the issues, or know the issues very well. You got Greg Foreman saying that's a possibility. By the way, that video will be linked in the description box, as well as all the other links that I put there. And of course, you've got Jason Whitlock, of course, continuing to go on with the Stephen A. Smith as a plant. I think that, of course, all of this right here could in fact be, credible, valid. But let's explore Stephen A. Smith potentially running for president just one more time. Before we fully dig into this, make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel. YouTube has a tendency to randomly unsubscribe you. Also, something else too, if you are not subscribed and you like this type of content, please consider subscribing. All you got to do is just hit that button, cut the notifications bell on. It's the best way to support this channel for free. And please leave a thumbs up on the video as well as the Facebook post so you guys can follow me there and also on Twitter. And let us go ahead and dive into this. So, we've talked about Stephen A. Smith running for president before, and I have basically mentioned, and of course, I still stand by what I've said. I've said, look, go ahead and run him. Go right ahead and run him. Seriously, run him. Because it would be an absolute joke to run against him in 2028. And I'll explain why that right there would in fact be the case, because there's obviously some things that people are in fact missing here. Now guys, I started with the News Nation bit, and recently Stephen A. Smith he's made some headlines with some pretty shocking statements, as you guys will see right here.
You were throwing your own aside. You did it to elected officials that got themselves in a speck of trouble. You threw them to the wolves. You had Supreme Court justices refusing to answer questions as to whether or not they were a woman or define what a woman was, even though they were married with children. It's a whole bunch of ridiculous nonsense that was going around and going on with the Democratic Party. We're not blind to what's transpiring right now. We're not blind to the specter hovering over all of us and how dangerous times can be, how hardship seems imminent as it pertains to tariffs and beyond.
Trump is doing exactly what it is that he said he was going to do. By the way, this right was in response to Kamala Harris going in front of a women's summit and basically doing the whole I told you so shtick. However, here's the thing. It's almost like they're trying to recreate what they tried to do when it came, or it's almost like the mirror image of what Trump was doing after he left office in 2021. It didn't take him long to go to CPAC. It didn't take him long to come out and say, look at exactly what the hell is going on. The difference between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump doing it is that when Donald Trump was talking about it, Donald Trump was telling the truth. Yes, I know about the tariffs. Yes, I know things are probably going to go up in price, but of course it's probably going to be temporary. And also to go on top of that, unlike in the case of Joe Biden, the Biden-Harris administration, Trump, for the most part, is doing exactly what he said he was going to do. Yes, there are people out there like Dave Smith, who is not a Trump voter. There are people out there like Candace Owens, who, quite frankly, is just bitching and bellyaching for no reason, who are complaining about the fact that Trump's not doing enough, even though he's not been in office for a full 90 days. I'll link this video right from Anton Daniels in the description box. I advise you guys watch that video, pay very, very close attention, because Anton kind of nails it. It's almost like she's taking the same exact position that Ann Coulter took when Trump first got elected in 2016. Don't get me started. Ain't got time to go through that right there, but just letting you guys know that there are people out there who are complaining about the administration from Trump's old side, even though I personally don't classify Dave Smith as a Trump supporter or a Trump voter. He's just another dumbass comedian who thinks he knows everything, but in reality he doesn't know shit. Yeah, I said that. Sue me. So, what's the deal here? So the deal here is that Stephen A. Smith, once again, is talking about potentially running for president. And he looks a little bit like, I don't know, it seems not likely given the fact that he just inked this massively large contract with ESPN. But then again, though, at the same time, though, ESPN would give him the ability to basically get his message out every day on national television, while he at the exact same time can get his message out on his podcast. And it's this same reason why it is that I say, yeah, let him run. I'll explain over the course of this video, but of course we got to get through the other takes. So Jason Whitlock has been basically on this shtick for a while, saying that Stephen A. Smith, for the most part, was a great big giant plant. He had Steve Kim on the other day, and of course Steve Kim basically explained, by the way, this episode right here is going to have a lot to do with tomorrow too, because we got to talk about the standing of a certain individual and certain individuals within a certain community. We'll get to that tomorrow. But I found what Steve Kim said to Jason to be, quite frankly, the truth.
Told our audience 2 years ago, and he's going to run for president. Sad? Does it make you laugh? What's it say about America and American culture? Your thoughts.
Oh, I hope it happens. Oh, I hope it happens. And Whitlock Stradamus, I've got to give you. I hope it happens. And Jason, I hope the running mate is Jazzy Jazz Ratchet. I hope it's a Smith Crockett ticket, because that's going to be a self-parody where no one realizes it. And everyone's going to realize it except for them. And look, it's easy to say that I'm going to run for president. I believe that Stephen A. Smith is getting some false hope and false courage because he's treated very well on these relatively conservative platforms that roll out the red carpet for him, right? But I don't think he realizes that politics is a blood sport. I think it's Roger Stone who said that. He has a very superficial, shallow knowledge of most issues. He can get away with it being on his podcast and saying things that are somewhat against the grain in front of a Bill Maher and everyone applauds. Okay, that's remedial stuff, but I was listening to his podcast on the way home from Vegas last Sunday, where he didn't like the fact that someone called him a red pill or a right-wing mouthpiece, and he did this whole soliloquy on it. And the fact that he just couldn't stand by what he said and stand firm and plant his feet and said, yes, I'm actually conservative. Jason, anyone that says that I am a social liberal but fiscally conservative has no guts, because you want all the privileges and the benefits of conservative policies, and you want none of the heat for actually having them or stand up and campaign on those points.
Everything that Steve Kim just said will come up a little bit later on this video when we talk about Greg, but he's correct. Stephen A. Smith is not exactly really and truly woke. He's more woke-like, meaning he says the woke talking points that are given to him by what Kwame Brown said, his white daddy. But at the end of the day, he's really and truly not woke enough for the left. And also, to go on top of that, him going on these conservative shows, yeah, they know exactly what they're doing by propping up Stephen A. Smith. Because if there's anything the modern left hates, it's somebody willing to talk to conservatives. That right there would be a big factor, especially in the Democratic primary and also in the general, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. But let's get back on track. It is a skull-crushing business. It really and truly is. Steve Kim is right. Now, guys, I had to edit a lot of that down, but still, though, at the same time, though, Steve Kim is correct. It would be, for the most part, fun to see Stephen A. Smith run for president, and, of course, if he got the nomination, he would probably get destroyed, especially if the economy begins to recover. But anyways, go ahead and get the pain out of the way, so that way this time next year, most of the pain is already gone and we're starting to recover. It sets us for a much, much longer recovery, much, much more sustained recovery in the future. And also, there's a lot more to go with that. Not going to go fully into this, but still, though, the trajectory would actually push the country getting back on the right track before 2028 even happened. By the way, who the hell and what the hell do the Democrats have to run on? They've already destroyed their brand, and as I have said before, and of course this right here is much, much more proof of this right here, at least as far as I am concerned, this right here is just more and more proof that, yes, it's going to be an Afrocentric campaign. Now, guys, I'm not saying this next part or playing this next part to insult Jason Whitlock. That's not what I'm doing. So don't think for 2 seconds that that's what I'm doing. By the way, I don't always agree with Whitlock. I remember when he was on First Things First, and he used to say some very, very dumb things that were not informed. They all do it at some point in time. It just so happens to be that some of them are worse than others. But this next bit, he does make a very good point. However, the thing is this right here. We just saw this with Kamala Harris. We saw this with Biden in 2020. We saw this with Hillary Clinton in 2016. We've seen this with Barack Obama twice. That is because even though you may have the backing from certain individuals, it does not mean that you are going to be successful. And I would argue that the American people, or most of the American people, especially based upon the last election results, have been able to, see through the facade. But let me play this anyways.
Get away with it, and why I've been trying to tell you all, you need to take this guy seriously. There wouldn't be all these people assisting him. There wouldn't be all these people never asking him about, like, hey, man, there's some real fraudulence around you, or accusations of fraudulence, or accusations that you've crafted a background narrative that doesn't pass the smell test. No one asks those questions. And that's why he believes he can run for president, and he's going to get away from it, and I get away with it. And I hear Steve talk about, hey, politics is a blood sport and blah, blah, blah. It is, and sometimes it isn't. When you're backed by the most powerful people on the planet, and they've decided that they're going to use you in this way, it doesn't matter. We've already seen it.
What Jason is saying is true. Endeavor, ESPN, these right here are the people who are backing him. However, what Jason does not see is that there's actually a lot of disadvantages to this right. And don't worry, I'll get to Greg Foreman soon, because I think Greg Foreman made some very, very insightful points. However, I'm going to come at it from a different perspective and kind of give you guys a little bit more that may not be getting mentioned, and why it is that, of course, Stephen A. Smith's venture would probably fail, especially if he gets to the nomination. In 2016, Hillary Clinton had massive name recognition because the mainstream media put her in our faces every single day. The mainstream media, whether they know it or not, are actually doing the exact same thing to Stephen A. Smith. But people oftentimes forget that Donald Trump's name had been around since really the late 1970s. He was already a known commodity, and Donald Trump even had a grassroots effort back in the 1980s to get him to run for president. It came to the forefront in 2000 when Trump considered running on the Reform Party, but then again, though, Trump would later on find out that the Reform Party had some pretty unsavory characters, and he would eventually walk away from that idea. It wasn't until sometime right around the time that Obama got elected president that Trump was even beginning to consider the possibility of running. And of course, he teased the 2012 run. It's almost like it was something that had been predicted for a very long time. It was almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy that it was eventually going to happen. And of course, it was an actual grassroots effort to get Donald Trump to run for president. Roger Stone knows all about that because Roger Stone was the main person who kept in contact with Trump over this entire situation. And Steve Kim even referenced Roger Stone, who, by the way, is almost like a political savant when it comes to this type of stuff. So, yeah, I have a hard time seeing Stephen A. Smith, who, by the way, when he has been pushed on issues, has wilted pretty daggone quickly, being formidable. Just simply saying. By the way, there's something else, too, and I want to go ahead and kind of preview this before we get to Greg Foreman. The Democratic Party primary process has not been set yet, but if they go with the same formula from 2024, if Kamala Harris is running, who, by the way, Kamala Harris is right now leading in a poll, or leading in multiple polls, as the candidate that they want to run on the Democratic ticket, she would easily win South Carolina. Now, Stephen A. Smith could be a problem for her in South Carolina, seeing how it is that both candidates are melanated, But seeing how it is that Jim Clyburn is basically the main voice that they go to there, I'm pretty sure that Jim Clyburn is going to pick his fellow politician, and that right there being Kamala Harris, and that endorsement is probably going to mean a lot more. Even if they do the Iowa caucuses first, yeah, you probably would see someone like Gretchen Whitmer or Josh Shapiro if they ran. When Iowa, the more socialist type candidate, would probably win in New Hampshire. Still, though, at the same time, South Carolina would be the third one. And South Carolina is one that normally decides primaries, not the state of Iowa. So spare us the bull crap. It's normally South Carolina that actually springboards the competition. And, of course, given the fact that California would be one of the first states on the actual list of Super Tuesday this time around, I think that Stephen A. Smith would have a very, very, very hard time getting beyond the person that he's been criticizing the most here recently. Jason's got some very good points, but of course some of these points can in fact be, debunked or countered. But let me get on to the main point. Which brings us to Black conservative perspective. Now, Greg is very smart, very bright, very good at reporting the news. He's also very, very good at breaking down what's going on. Very, very bright person. Both of us are obviously from the same state. Both of us live in North Carolina. He went to the University of North Carolina. I went to East Carolina University. He is a Carolina fan. I am a Duke fan. Those right there are basically the main disagreements me and him are going to have. But this right here is one area where I have to provide sort of the other side of the coin. It's not out of malice or anything like that, so don't think that that is the case. But let us go ahead and get to Greg. A little over a minute. I had to kind of edit the two clips together, but here you go.
A politician or anybody like that. Like, you're somebody that can come from the business or the entertainment world, right? In Stephen A's case, the entertainment world, and you can run for president, okay? And because you don't have a record to run on, the same flexibility that Trump had, in the sense that it's hard to pinpoint Stephen A on a position or what he believes because, again, he doesn't have a policy record, right? He doesn't have a voting record that will tether him to a certain position that may or may not be popular, right? Again, this is why Kamala Harris couldn't run as a moderate, or why Gavin Newsom can't run as a moderate, because, again,
It does, but here's the thing, Greg. Stephen A is not woke enough. As Kwame Brown has said, it's basically the white daddy's talking points. Stephen A. Smith is a parrot. He is woke, of course, but at the same time, not woke enough. He's probably somewhat woke in his personal life, but not to the level that the wokes want. And Greg, you yourself have even talked about how it is that the wokes are not exactly wanting to give up woke, and the Democrats not wanting to give it up. Stephen A. Smith's credentials are already hurt. Now, he does bring up a good point here in a second about, or over the course of this monologue that he had, on how it is that Stephen A. Smith would be much, much harder to pin down on certain topics. And I'm here to tell you guys right now that that is not the case. Stephen A. Smith would actually be a Republican's dream to pin down on certain issues, because Stephen A. doesn't really actually have an actual answer that's satisfying to the left-wing side of the aisle, as I'll explain here in a second. The prevailing theory is that if Stephen A. Smith was to run for president, he could run against Democrats because their records are god-awful and horrible. That is obviously an advantage that Donald Trump had. However, the thing is this right here with Donald Trump. Donald Trump's normal way of actually countering this was much, much better. Like, for example, I remember in one of the first debates on Fox News, Megyn Kelly back in 2016 asked him about a certain issue, and Trump actually found a way to flip-flop on the issue 3 times in one sitting. I changed my vote. This is how I feel now. And then all of a sudden he goes, Megyn, it's about being negotiable. Once you get in office, you've got to kind of change things up. You've got to kind of see which way things are going at that time before you make a decision. What he was trying to say was he was trying to point out that there was actually a disadvantage to rigidity, which is one of the main reasons why it is that people who are complaining about Trump not keeping his promises at this moment in time is not exactly valid, because for the most part, politicians run on rhetoric. Most people know this. And when politicians get in office, when they finally get the position of the presidency, they look at the situation and guess what they have to do? They have to be somewhat negotiable. Stephen A. cannot actually do that because he has flip-flopped even from his own position so many daggone times. And by the way, we can always go back in time and provide proof of him saying this right here, and of course changing it. Yeah. In the case of Trump, we really and truly couldn't do that. Stephen A. Smith would be much, much easier to counter. And then to go on top of that, when you actually try to get Stephen A. Smith to get serious on the issue, he ends up taking the non-woke line, which will not be good enough for roughly 1/3 of the Democratic Party base, which has gone completely and totally radicalized. So Stephen A. Smith would, in fact, be much, much easier to beat. But there was more from this. Now, real quick, guys, I want to just kind of throw this out here, too. Something else with Stephen A., and I'm kind of editing this clip in a little bit late. You're going to hear me say it again. Stephen A. Smith has also, like Steve Kim said, he has also found ways to cower from said position and bow to the woke mob as well. He's not viewed as strong. That's basically the general point here.
And he will build up some supporters, okay, in the same way that President Trump did, right? Just because of the fact that he's extremely entertaining. And also on top of that, he's probably going to play the radical moderate, right? Oh, both sides are, bad, right? Which again is the exact same thing that President Trump did back in 2015, 2016, right? Both sides are bad, right? That's basically how Trump won the GOP primary. So I know it sounds like a joke, right? Like to think about it, but it actually makes sense when you really think about it. And this is the dangerous part about it, right? This is the part about it that, again, a lot of people need to realize, right? That if Stephen A. actually does run, okay, as the radical moderate, right? Because I think that's the lane that he's going to try to run in if he does run. There's 100% chance he will be bought and sold by the establishment Democrats, right? Because the establishment Democrats are trying to save themselves.
Good point. However, I think Stephen A. Smith has built up all the supporters that he is going to build up. Back in 2015, this right here is when ESPN really and truly began to go full-blown woke. In 2016, with Colin Kaepernick, it took another step. In 2017, when Trump was in office, he was kind of feuding a little bit with LeBron James on Twitter. Guess what happened? It got more and more woke. Then it got more and more woke in 2018. Then in 2019, it actually went completely, totally crazy. 2020 was the overall ultimate end game. In 2021, even some of ESPN's more loyal viewers were really and truly beginning to get fed up with the wokeness. So in 2022, 2023, ESPN tried to tone it down, and they've toned it down a little bit more. However, if Stephen A. Smith is running for president, next thing you know, you've got anybody and everybody who's expressed some form of jealousy of Stephen A. Smith. They're going to be suddenly supporting him, and therefore it's probably going to turn more and more viewers off because, quite frankly, it's just going to look like somebody who, quite frankly, works for ESPN now, slobbing the knob of LeBron James again like they always do. ESPN 4 days a week, unlike Donald Trump, who was on television only once a week with The Apprentice. And by the way, Donald Trump's name had already been synonymous with success, and people even knew about his bankruptcies and his comeback, and therefore the dynamic is a little bit different. I think in the case of Stephen A. Smith, he would have already maxed out his followers, and you would probably see that in the South Carolina primary. By percentage, by overall raw vote, it would probably be the California primary, but still, though, the point is this right here. Stephen A. does not have the reach that many people think that he may have. And, of course, there are more and more people who have walked away from him over the years than have actually joined because of the wokeness. And, of course, there's always the fact that there are people out there who have exposed his wokeness as in being fake. Like I said before, he's not woke enough for the loons. And that right there is the main reason why it is he would not be able to win, because he would not be able to conjure up enough support to get him over. Also, something else, too, about Stephen A., he's not going to be able to fully tap in and go full-blown woke because guess what? He's had to call out the wokes from time to time, but then again, at the same time, though, the wokes will also view him as weak because guess what? He's also apologized to the wokes. He's also bent the knee on several occasions to the woke. So, therefore, he's not going to be viewed as strong to either side of the aisle or either wing of the Democratic Party. It is true that he would appeal to the Bill Maher types out there, but at the end of the day, the Bill Maher types are only about 30% of the current Democratic Party. Losing probably half of the conservative moderate crowd, you're probably losing a good portion of the wokes who know that Stephen A. Smith is fake woke, so he's not going to be able to conjure enough votes to get across the finish line of the general election. It's possible that he could win the primary, but then again, given the same time, though, that there's another black woman who ran for president, who, by the way, is still somewhat popular to a certain size of the circle, the woke circle. Yeah, I have a feeling if he runs and Kamala Harris is in the primary, he probably loses to her. And not to mention the fact that she could play the feminism card. And there are videos of Stephen A. Smith being a bit of a misogynist himself, which, by the way, is a little bit of a no-no in the current Democratic Party, which is ultra-feminine and Afrocentric. So, no, I don't see it happening. But you guys tell me what you think in the comment section. I would love to hear what you guys have got to say. There's going to be one video coming out tomorrow. It's going to be a relatively lengthy video. It's really going to be kind of focusing somewhat on what we talked about here, but also on LeBron James too. Not about the beef. It's a different video altogether. And yes, the Obamas are going to come up as well. Just give you guys a heads up before the video closes out. Please hit the like button, subscribe, share the video, tell me what you think in the comment section, and I'll see you guys later.